introduce who's here. My name is Jenny Earl. I represent Northern Utah, which is the very top of the state, Box Elder, Cache, and then down through a couple of rural districts. And then we have Board Member Green. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, Board Member Green. I'm District 14, the middle section of Utah. Thank you.
Okay. And I believe we have Vice Chair Leanne Wood online, if you want to introduce yourself.
Hi, Leanne Wood. I represent District 4, South Davis County, North Salt Lake region, and I'm on my way.
Thank you. And Board Member Brenton, do you want to introduce yourself as well?
Hi, thank you. Board Member Brenton, District 15. I represent the southern part of the state from Washington County all the way across to San Juan.
Thank you. And I think Member Real will be here shortly as well, so she's not here yet. Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. Our first, no public comment, right? So, okay, I don't see anybody from the public here. So no public comment today, so that's another thing. If public wants to attend our meetings and comment on any of our items, we'd love to accommodate you. The first item is Every Student Succeeds Act Amendment, and we'll have Sydney McCarty, am I saying that right? Yes. And Sarah Wibke come and speak to us if they can introduce themselves, and then they'll talk about why this is necessary and what the recommended changes are, and a little bit about public comment too, if that's okay.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm Sydney McCarter. I'm the Director of Assessment and Accountability.
Good morning, Sarah Wibke, Director of School Improvement.
And we are coming with the agenda item of our Every Student Succeeds Act amendment. We had a few pieces of information, both feedback from the field about requested changes to make some of our tables less confusing, try to make them easier to understand and to communicate with teachers about growth tables, as well as some requirements from elements that we weren't quite meeting yet, specifically pertaining to the accommodated or the, alternate assessment for EL students that we needed to make sure we had a growth plan for those students, as well as some school improvement updates that needed to be made to our ESSA amendment or ESSA plan. So as a part of the process for amending the ESSA plan, we got feedback from our assessment directors, from our ALS directors, our students, people that work with our students that are learning English, and they gave us some feedback about what they were hoping to change. We took those recommendations to our Utah Policy Advisory Committee, and they gave us feedback on those changes. We also worked with our data and statistics team to model out the different ways we could look at growth, and ultimately decided that the recommendation that we put forward to receive public comment on was the best way to go, of specifically for growth, of looking at how students were improving with their language acquisition. And so part of that was to take those recommendations out to the public and get public comment. We did have some issues with the documents that were posted, the link that was posted. There was also a PDF available, but we decided we wanted to extend the public comment because of the issues that we found with some people not being able to access the survey. So we extended the public comment period and were able to gather a few more responses. But we had lots of people that's relative. We had people that were able to get into the survey but then didn't leave any comments. There were a few people that left comments, but not many. I'm not sure if there's other questions.
Okay. And will you say questions specific to the public comment, or are we talking with the ESSA plan, the recommendations? Either. Okay. Yeah. Does anyone have any questions or comments?
This is Board Member Brenton. I have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
So I'm looking at these programs and just wondering, with the national movement that we're seeing with the Trump administration Are you hearing of any changes coming down? Because I feel like there's momentum among constituents and parents to see us switch to more of equal opportunity for everybody, but not relying maybe so heavily on, you can't force people up if they don't want to come up. So I just wonder what you're hearing coming from the Department of Education, if anything, on this.
Is that, I'm trying to, are you referring specifically to assessments and
Yeah,
testing
like
student?
well,
Okay.
because every student succeeds, right? This goes back a long time. We're trying to help the lowest levels, right? Not let anybody fall through the crack. But I just, it's hard to do, right? So all these years, all these assessments, I just wonder if there's movement to focus more on the equal opportunities being offered to everybody, but not so much pressure on teachers with the assessments and assessment levels as well.
And maybe you're headed this direction. Maybe you could speak how our plan is unique in the way that we've put together, and that would fall under Sarah a little bit, but that, the springboard schools and such, where we're trying to provide those additional resources, as well as the WIDA assessment, how it does help for the access. And maybe, and hopefully they're answering the question. At least that's what comes to mind when I think of it, so.
Yes, thank you. Again, Sarah Wibke, Director of School Improvement. What we have heard from the feds has been around, there isn't any desire, this is again what they've shared with us, there isn't any desire to reauthorize ESEA. It's been reauthorized a few times. The most recent authorization was ESSA. So that's why we have an ESSA plan and not an ESEA plan. But to our knowledge, that is what they have shared. In regards to what Board Member Earl was sharing, yes, certainly we have some nuances in our state that are different from other states that we can take into consideration as far as trying to enhance that access, if you will, for all students. And then did you want to add anything about assessment, Sid?
Yeah, I appreciate the question. So the question about are the assessments working? And I know there was a letter recently talking about ESEA flexibility and waivers, and the waivers were not about assessments, about not administering assessments, but rather with innovative assessments and looking at innovative assessments. And that's something in Utah I think we already have an innovative assessment system, but not necessarily something that would require a waiver from our federal government. But there's still a requirement to administer assessments, both to our students for our state summative assessments for accountability, as well as with our students learning English and measuring their language proficiency to understand what kind of supports those students need.
Okay. Board Member Brinton, do you have another question or comment?
Yes, since this is on the public record, could you just explain the differences between ESEA and ESSA?
Yes, absolutely. So ESEA is the Elementary and Secondary Education Act. So it sort of, it was the act that started the movement in this direction. The ESSA is Every Student Succeeds Act. And so it's just a slightly different name. Every time they do a reauthorization on the federal level, it gets a new name. And so that's why the name change. It's every time they make a change within that authorization, we get a new change. And this one it happened in 2015, I believe, was the most recent reauthorization.
Can you speak to did you make any changes from the public comment? Because you had, right, whatever you put out for public comment, and maybe, is it one color, the one thing, and the other color? Did I miss that?
And the red line document was the proposed changes.
Okay, and the blue is the additional, okay, thank you.
But with the actual public comment, there was one change that we made. There was a specific indication where we had missed changing a student's age instead of a student's grade. So in the calculation, we were specifically appreciative of that comment, because it was something that we needed to make an editing error, a change. As far as the other public comment, some of it was positive. They appreciated the changes. Some of it was a little bit of a misunderstanding or a request to go back to one of the other models that we had determined wasn't the most effective because it was penalizing particularly our secondary schools with the model that was being proposed. And one of the longer pieces of feedback was around that, but that was something that we had taken to several different advisors, and we determined that that was not the best course for determining growth for students because it negatively impacted our secondary schools higher than any other schools.
Okay, and so the blue is greater clarity on almost every situation, add just a little bit more clarity, and then I did read that particular one as well in the public feedback, so I just didn't make the connection that the red was before, the blue was after, so thank you. Do you have a question?
Oh, yeah. Well, before we start, I was going to, You are not. Yep.
Oh, well.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
Yeah, exactly. Superhero. It looks good, actually. It really works.
I'm feeling like Wonder Woman vibes or something here.
It is. It's giving, yes.
Yeah, we can
Yeah.
work something out, I'm sure. Give us a few hours here.
I'm pretty sure member Earl
Yeah,
has
I've got some in my
like
van.
a costume box in her van. I'm pretty sure. Happy birthday.
Happy birthday, yeah.
This is probably, I guess, this Venn diagram of English language learners, multilingual learners, and schools that need improvement, that are seeing struggling students and facing just a lot more barriers and roadblocks. I think this Venn diagram, that middle section there, to me is probably one of the most important things that we could be focusing on in education right now. I have a lot of schools in my district that are on a school improvement plan, and I have a lot of multilingual learners in my district as well. And so it's something I care very deeply about. And I have been talking to MLL teachers recently, and there's been some interesting things that they've brought up. One was that they talked to me about how their students purposefully don't like to perform well on the WIDA because they feel like they will lose the resources and the courses that they're in currently because they will do well and then they'll move out and go into the other classes. And that is kind of gets philosophical on testing and assessment and like if students care and like how we can judge assessment. But I also know that there are a lot of schools that are trying to find creative ways to help every student succeed, right? And I'm wondering what you feel like, one, if you've heard of any other states that have found creative ways to help some of our multilingual learners, and if there are things that you feel like resources or different ways of assessing. I don't know, like it feels like there's a lot of work we could do here, and I think that the plan looks great. I think that the changes are great. I don't have a lot of like, it's hard for me to know exactly where to go with this, but I feel like there's a lot of work we can do. And this just feels like we're adjusting it a little bit to make sure we're covering every space. But so I guess my question is, what more could we be doing? And do you feel like you've heard of or know of other states that have gotten really creative about how they're integrating and supporting their multilingual learners and helping every student succeed?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I think that's a really important question. I would love support from Megan Lopez, who works on our WIDA assessment and works with our.
And I guess my other part is, have you heard of this? Because I had like 3 or 4 MLL teachers tell me that they're like, my students, well, this is the quote I got, my students don't give a flip about the WIDA. And they say that, and they're like, because they think they're going to lose me as a teacher and lose all their resources and aid. So I don't know if that's a common thing or if I was just, it was anecdotal based on the teachers I was talking to, too.
Thank you. All right. Hi, Megan Lopez. I'm in the Assessment and Accountability Department, and I am the Secondary English Language Arts and WIDA Assessment Specialist. So that is a really great question, and I have had an amazing opportunity. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to work with several states in the CCSSO collaborative for English learners. And your concerns are concerns that are shared in many states, and these are issues that we discuss quite frequently in that collaborative, but also within the WIDA consortium. And so I think one of the biggest things, and I do try to work with LEAs on this, because it is a very unique assessment since it is not on the opt-out form, right? Due to Title III law. And so we see a lot of students not wanting to take the test, but we have to provide the opportunity for them to take the test. And a lot of them don't realize that being a multilingual student is actually a great asset to have. And so we need to start to encourage that conversation with our students more. And so we do talk about this as much as possible when we have these concerns, and that if students do test proficient on the access during that annual testing period, that assessment can then be used to apply for the seal of biliteracy. Which that seal goes right on their diploma, and it is something that they can use when applying for jobs or post-secondary schooling. So it is actually, in my opinion, it's a superpower. When people are speaking multiple languages, I'm in awe, right? And so really starting to encourage them to do their best on the assessment and take that opportunity to engage in that civil right seriously, so they know that this is something I can use to my advantage, and I can show that I have this asset to help, in whatever job I go in, right? And we know that.
So sorry to interrupt. Well, first of all, yes, they are linguistically talented students. Like, I know English and like 50 Spanish words. So like, they are more talented than I am. But do you think that because I know that these educators are doing things like going to other teachers that their MLL students are in their classes and be like, you can't do this, you need to do this, you need to help them with this. Like, they're kind of like this, like their own little personal like advocate with the other courses that they're taking or classes that they might be taking, in high school at least. And so do you feel like there needs to be more resources in regards to like personnel or like other ways that we can encourage and be like, you're not losing this support even though you're performing really well in your route to learning English and being successful in the school? Or do you feel like there are other ways to reorganize their pathways out of those courses to show that they still have support? Or is it just about communicating like, no, this is actually really freaking cool that you are getting this seal on your diploma, that you're English proficient and you know other languages?
Right. That's such a great question, and I think the response is it's a combination of all. It's the encouragement, but I do think earlier you said you hear teachers being concerned about having to take other classes and not have the opportunity, and especially for electives, and this is for secondary students. One thing to also remember is that services, while the test may not be something you can opt out of, services you can, although we would always encourage those services to be taken advantage of with students.
It seems like
and
they
that
want the
parents-
services more.
They
They
want the services, but they also want the electives, those opportunities, because that's just growing their educational repertoire more. So I think engaging parents and knowing what the services can do. But I think as far as resources, I do hear, I can't say it's something across the entire state or even the nation, but I do think some LEAs wish they had more resources. And I think it tends to be the smaller LEAs where people have to wear numerous hats, and they want to be able to do push-in services. And that's something we've always encouraged, myself and Dr. Estrada, that because then we don't have to pull the students out of class to be missing anything, or it is a different class and they're missing their chance for an elective. So we will always encourage push-in services where they can still be in those classes, receiving that great instruction that those multilingual learners need. But not all schools have the staff to do that. And so their only option is to do pull-out services if you have one person in an LEA, such as a smaller district or a charter school, for example. And so I think more personnel that are highly trained and qualified would benefit those smaller districts.
Okay, Board Member Brill.
Right, just a follow-up.
Finish up and
Get
then
me
we'll
finished
get
up
back on
because I
our
think this is really
agenda.
important. I told you this is listen, I talked one time yesterday, okay? One time, and I was, because I got
And I'm
called on.
timing you, you're making
And
up for it today.
Whatever, no way. I have a ways to go. So I just think that this is, that what we're working on today is very structural. But we saw with Representative Perucci last year putting in dollars to make sure that we're supporting our MLL students and the change in demographics in our state. The principal at Harriman High told me in my role at Salt Lake Community College, if you opened up 35 more ESL courses, we could fill them immediately at Salt Lake Community College. And so this is something I think that this is very, this is like our framework here, but I think like I think that it opens up a big conversation to talk more holistically about strategies for supporting our students in that Venn diagram between school improvement, schools that need some improvement and some support, and then also our MLL students. So I think it's really important.
Thank you, and thank you for the feedback. I have sat in on assessment discussions over how to adjust right, and it's not, they don't take it lightly. And they don't, it's a very intellectual conversation about what is successful and what's not. And that's where a lot of these have come from. And then that kind of narrowing down. So I know that helps get resources to where it's most needed. And that's the point, right? Some students don't need as many resources as others. And if we can really hone in on where those need to go. Board Member Green, did you have a couple of questions?
I do.
Okay.
So I also think this one is super important. One thing that I'm trying to reconcile is just the feedback that was actually received. So just to start real quick, when did you receive the feedback and how did you go through? Because there's, some of the feedback is very, very specific. I thought it was I was communicated clearly on the issues that they were concerned with. Specifically, one thing is how it's scored. So you have the ELP and then how many years they're enrolled, as they walked through their logic on that feedback. Could we just start there? Was that feedback on par, or was it maybe not a full picture?
Yeah, so as far as responding to the feedback, we had a meeting with our internal team to review every single public comment and determine, was action needed, was this not, there was no action needed. I can share that with some of the feedback that was, particularly the one that was the very long piece of feedback, we met personally with that person and walked through each of their pieces of feedback and understood a little bit more detail about where they were coming from. But it was not surprising. It's something that had been shared previously with us. And so he actually responded through email after he sent that. And we said, hey, we'd love to meet and talk with you about your feedback as well. But we did go through item by item of that public comment and determine our response to that as well, which we can share. We didn't want to bog down all of your reading, but we can share our response of what action was needed from USBE versus not needed. I think on the one that you were talking about with the age or the time in program, I think that was one of the questions from the longer comment that we looked at. The reason that we weren't able to go the direction that comment was pointing us to was that we also needed to look at time in program and look at, just because a student has receives the same score on their WIDA assessment, it also depends on their growth target, if that was their fourth year in the program or their first year in the program, because we know from experience that students who it's their first year will tend to make a little bit more progress. So their growth target is going to be different than a student who got that same score but has already been in the program 4 or 5 years, that they'll have less growth because they've already made a lot more growth earlier in their learning progression.
So is that built into the model then? Like, is that,
Do you want to respond to that?
when you're engaging with this model, are you trained to see that? Or, how does somebody look at that, those dynamics with a student?
So our new growth table, and again, as Sid pointed out earlier, and just so, because we have a couple new members, I'm Megan Lopez, Assessment and Accountability, WIDA Assessment Specialist. And so we, in the past, had 3 growth tables that were confusing. There are some per ESSA, there are some non-negotiables and just things that we have to meet per the law. And so with that longer piece of public comment feedback, there were some components that were desired in it and that we know other people may desire it too, other LEAs and even other states may desire those changes, but we can't make those changes because of law. So when it came to the question about age, per ESSA, we do have to have a set baseline, and that baseline cannot be variable and changing. And we also have to set time and program. Each state does get to determine their time and program and exit path. In Utah, we have determined it's 6 years. We know that most research and studies tell us that students become proficient from 5 to 7 years. And so we just landed right in the middle with 6 years. That 6-year point was established actually in our very first ESSA, consolidated state ESSA plan, essentially. And so we didn't change that. The new tables are collapsed down to just one. So there's no confusion about what table do I begin on and always stay on. It's just one table. So our educators are not as confused. And I think also it's important to remember that the EL indicator is really meant, the purpose behind it for accountability is to be able to identify really high functioning schools that are meeting the needs of these students, and we're seeing growth and they are exiting students within that 6 years, but also being able to identify schools that maybe have more opportunities for growth. And then that would be opportunities for Sarah's team to come in and work with those schools. And then also, though, we still know that teachers want to use these tables to inform growth and make goals. And so while that's never been the intention, we still wanted to be responsive to that need. And so we wanted these tables to make sense. These tables are also based on Utah empirical data. So we looked at Utah ML student data to inform this. One thing that you will notice on the tables that never was reflected in the past is that we actually see a weird blip, and this goes across all grade levels, in that about in their second full year of in service and in program, they actually have a dip and then they go back up. So if you look in that second full year, you can see that the data, it shows we don't have as much expectation because we've seen this pattern across years of our students just not making as much growth that year. And we've talked to several LEAs about this phenomenon. We have lots of theories there. It's more of a new thing. And so we've been seeing it happen in some states also. We're still trying to figure it out, and I know there's a lot of people that are a lot smarter than me across the nation that are trying to figure out why is this happening. But we did want it to be reflected of what we see students doing, and we don't want schools to be penalized. So this should also help them see like what's happening in that year. Can we maybe change that trend? But this should be more user-friendly for everyone in the state, but also still allow us to do what we need to do to identify those schools that are just really doing well, and then the schools where there are opportunities for growth with our MLs. But this is the table that meets the definitions and the requirements of ESEA. And when we did speak with those that gave us that really good public comment, there were concerns that we also share, but couldn't be flexible on due to the law.
Okay, any other questions? Yeah. Leanne, go ahead.
So a few years back, I was served in UPAC, and we talked about the WIDA scores, and there was a discussion where there reaches a point where, as Member Rill was saying, they want the services, but they may not need the services. Does this decrease in this graph help in that, where they actually are showing the growth that is expected of them to move them out? Sometimes, I don't want to use the word crutch, but sometimes they could be doing better, but they rely on those services. I don't know if I'm being articulate in what I'm saying, but does this help in that, where it's like, yeah, you're making the growth that we expect, we're going to move you to a fewer services to let you stand on your own and show what you can do? Or does that help? Or I just was seeing that connection with a question I already had, but when you were talking about this kind of dip, it's like, oh, wait a minute, if it's already expected, maybe that helps with that.
So we would still expect services to be pretty robust in all years. I think one common misconception when it comes to our ML's progress is that as they start to gain and become more proficient in their academic English learning, we tend, and I think this is just human nature, we tend to want to do gradual release, right? So just in the same way as me teaching my kids to ride a bike, I'm going to slowly take off those training wheels, and then I'm not going to hold on as much, and I'm going to let them soar more. What we know with MLs is that it's the opposite. So we do want to be very aware of this dip that happens and keep those services going. But even into those 4th, 5th, and 6th years, that's actually where those services need to become more sophisticated and robust, because as I gain in academic English, the language becomes even more sophisticated. And so I need more sophisticated supports and probably even more intensive supports to get to those higher levels that we expect. It's not something that we can gradually release. It's something we need to continue with. And that is actually something we've all been really trying to discuss with LEAs, because we do want to step back and do gradual release, but we actually need to step in more and provide more services. So while we see the expectation becoming less, we still need to help, because it's hard to grow even those smaller.
When you say expectation, you're talking about, that's the normal growth that you would expect, right? So if their baseline is between 3 and 4, year 6 at 0.1 would be the normal expected growth, right? That's the average. Is that what we're talking about?
Yeah.
So, okay,
And
I just want to make sure.
Yes, even though it's tiny, it's really hard to make that growth, because boy, that language that they need to be using, it really is very sophisticated.
Okay, Joanne, did you have a question?
Yeah, I just wondered, how do we help with excitement about growth? You know, that we help them want to launch and want to be free. I just wonder, And have you seen a huge, I mean, over the last 4 years, there have been so many more come in. I have heard from teachers who feel so overwhelmed with the amount of ELL students coming into their class, and then the expectations with tests and grading on how they're doing in their class. In that first year, are they counted in the assessments, or like how are we supporting the teachers? I guess in that I've wondered.
We can.
So
go ahead and answer
that's
the
a
question.
that's totally two
At
separate
some
questions.
point,
I realize.
I want to get back on the ESSA document, and then we can always have a broader, if we wanted to do more of a standard assessment study piece, right, where we can have people come in. But go ahead. I don't want to, because if this helps to inform information on this,
And then I also, if you all see things where you see a need for change in law, do you feel like you can come and present that, and so that it can get to legislators as they're talking about things, that see the need for, change to help and do this better?
Yes, we do know we have had an increase in students that are participating on the English language proficiency assessment. So more students have been identified this last year than previous years. And we did see a bill from Representative Perucci this last year about that emergency funding when there's an extreme influx of students and the LEA needs some additional support to be able to support those students. So that for sure is something that we have seen. Just anecdotally, as far as students being excited about growth, my previous work in Ogden School District, working there, we were able to have students that, and after leaving, talking with the team that still works there, they use that growth goal as something for the students to get excited about. The students knew what their target was, and they helped to set that growth goal individually for themselves. And that, I think, helps to help the students be involved and take initiative over their own learning and measurement of their progress. And then understanding the students that while they may not have that person as a teacher, that person could still be a resource and cheering them on in the successes that they have in their other classes.
Okay, and just a follow-up real quick. I just wonder about a mentorship program. Is there any kind of mentorship where as they're going up, where they come help the students coming in so that they're serving, that might be a way to help them be excited?
Yeah, that's a genius
I
idea.
think that's a great idea. I don't know if we have that currently, but I do know we have teacher mentors and things within our buildings. But thinking about the connection in those two spaces is something that we could certainly talk about as staff.
Thank you. Board Member Grain, you have additional questions?
Yeah, so part of this is the composite score. Will you help us understand, again, this goes back to the feedback that we received and those changes that it sounds like we're making where that score has been lowered. Is that a true or false statement, or is it just now because of how we're adjusting that it's not being lowered, rather it's being presented differently? And I'm referencing page 1, if that helps you.
Yeah.
The 4.2 composite
Yeah,
plus the
who's best to answer that?
3.5.
Because it is nuanced, right? I remember this discussion. Yeah, I don't know who's best to.
I can speak to it. So our exit strategy, or exit criteria, it changed in 2023. And previously we had an overall proficiency of 5.0 as the exit criteria. It was way too high. While we want to set high expectations, it was beyond a
Who made
high
that change?
expectation. And so
In 2023,
So in 2023, we made the change to a new exit strategy.
USBE did?
With our previous ESSA amendment, so it came forward with an ESSA amendment in 2023. That change was recommended at that
Okay,
point.
all right, so we're coming back to that moment and maybe,
We are adjusting the tables to better meet
What you
that
see.
exit criteria, and to also make sure that we're looking at Utah's student data to inform those tables now. Previously, the tables were basically collapsed to meet the need. And as we've gotten more data, we know now we need to adjust the tables to meet that new exit criteria that was set in 2023.
And specifically, it hit two components instead of just the one overarching, right? That there's two pieces to it, and I can't remember exactly what those are.
The
but-
speaking domain.
that's right.
The the assessment it has 4 domains. It's reading, writing, speaking, and listening. All 4 domains will make that composite, that overall, which we expect for the 4.2. And then we also have that secondary criteria of the speaking domain at a 3.5 or higher. And so now the new plan also incorporates that. So students that have met the overall, but maybe not the speaking component, we can also measure growth for them and know where we need to be providing those services specifically in that speaking component.
So it's allowing students not to exit just because they've met that composite score, but understanding that we want them to have the ability to read, write, listen, and speak at a proficiency level that they will be successful before they exit from those services.
And the last question I have, I know we have more questions. But the last one I'm going to ask is just about funding. Is there like a special category of funding for this within a school? And then if they exit, because they've met those benchmarks, that funding goes? Just let's talk the money for a minute, if there is.
So we receive funding for the assessment side, and I think Christelle and the other team in Title III, which your team
Yes,
deals
we
with the
receive
school
federal
funding.
Title III funds to support our multilingual learners, but the assessment side is a different funding stream. And WIDA?
May I add one component?
Go for it.
Once a student exits, and again, this is per law, they do have to enter. They are no longer considered an EL once they exit, but they do have to be monitored for 4 years to ensure that they're still making growth as expected. And I do not believe there's any specific funding for those 4 years of monitoring that do have to take place. Do you know
Okay.
of any funding?
Do we have any other questions? And I'm not
I
trying to
was
cut
just
us
gonna
short.
add, no, I was going to add to that is
support
that's what some of my educators told me. They're like, but they still have my support for 4 years. So that means that those educators who had these ML students in their courses are still supporting these students, even though they also on top of their normal workload for an additional 4 years after they leave their class. So, okay, that's really, there's no funding. Okay.
So the Title III funding funds the ML?
Title III funds multilingual learners, immigrant, and refugee.
Okay.
Do you get at-risk funding also, though? That isn't
The
some-
WPU at-risk
yeah,
add-on?
yeah,
Yes, that would be state funding. Mhm.
Okay, but does that go away once they are exit?
It's only for specific LEAs that meet that
That
formula.
have
So-
generated that as their definition for at-risk?
So it wouldn't be for all LEAs.
Okay.
Okay, I'm ready to entertain a motion.
I have one minor question.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
On the, well, it's on page 9, and it's just probably something I need clarified on. Because it says that for ATSI, Utah identifies any school with a student group whose 3-year average performance is below the cut score. Then below it says schools identified must have a total N size of 10 in each year. Is that school groups? How many schools do we have that have less than 10?
Yes, it is student groups. And so if they were identified, our most common student group identified as students with disabilities. So if the N size is less than 10.
Okay, should that say school groups? Because I just read it over, I'm like, schools with less than 10, and I was like, how many of those do we have in Utah?
It could,
But is it just?
the
it's just-
ATSI designation is only student groups. It's not whole school as
So-
well.
so it's assumed.
It's, yeah.
Perfect,
You
that's
got it.
all I needed to know.
Yes.
Okay, now I'm ready to entertain a motion. It's in red or
Okay,
yellow up
I'll make
there,
a
so-
motion.
Okay.
Recommend that the committee approves the amendments to Utah's Every Student Succeed Act, ESSA, plan and forward it to the full board for final approval.
Okay, additional discussion? All right, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that passed unanimously. Thank you. Thank you for all the questions. So, and I think if anybody had additional questions, they could easily reach out and get some additional feedback on it, right? So, okay.
Happy birthday, Sarah.
Okay, we're on to number 3.3. It's an action item. It's R277-701, early college program. This is a continuation, and there's an amendment with it. And who's speaking to this? Oh, okay. Introduce yourself.
Hello, Jennifer Wadsworth. I'm the policy advisor. This is our 5-year continuation. There's been some changes to grammar just to reflect the definitions and the title of the rule.
I will entertain any questions. And I had one more recommendation, and it was just you did capitalization, but there was one, I'm like, why did we not capitalize that?
Oh, no.
Let me click on it real quick, sorry. CE, is there a reason why we wouldn't capitalize it, but I'll give you the line. And this is just maybe a grammatic thing, I don't even know if it needs to be brought up, but on line 26, so you have it CE capital, but you don't have concurrent enrollment is not capitalized.
Enrollment.
Would you like?
We can fix that.
Okay, you got
Yeah.
it. Okay.
Yep.
So just want to make sure that was
Thank you. Good
consistent.
catch.
Because you did the consistency through the whole rest of the document.
Thank you.
Any questions? I would entertain a motion unless we have questions. So,
Okay, I'll make a motion that the committee approves R277-701 early college programs and forward to the board for approval.
additional discussion? Okay, the motion before the committee is that the committee continue R277-701 early college programs and forward to the board for approval. All those in favor? Aye. That passes unanimously. And we're on to number 3.4, which is R277-324 paraprofessional, paraeducator programs, assignments, and qualifications. And are you doing this as well?
I'm doing it.
Okay. Right.
Thank you, Chair Lee Voorhees, Deputy Superintendent, Student Achievement. So this is a very simple change to R277-324 that will initiate the possibly more substantive change. So we're simply removing code references from this rule because they no longer exist. So code has changed. These specific pieces of code no longer exist, so they don't fit in the rule. That's the only change we are making.
Okay. Any questions to this rule or comments? Okay, and this rule's been in place how long? I know it was continued about 5 years ago.
Forever.
Forever, okay. And
Well,
I actually,
since
at least two-
ESSA, the previous version, which was the No Child Left Behind version of ESEA, we have had this rule at least that long.
okay. I had some questions from a couple of my schools this week, but they didn't get back with me with any recommendations. But in essence, this rule defines what a paraprofessional can do within the classroom or within a school setting.
And what is required of a paraprofessional by both special education and ESSA.
Okay.
Which is going to
Okay.
lead to what I'm going to tell you after you make the change.
Okay, so do you want us to make the motion
Yeah.
then and approve it? If anybody would like to make that motion, that would be great. It's 3.4. Yeah, there it is.
Recommend that the committee approves R277-324 paraprofessional, paraeducator programs, assignments, and qualification, draft 1. Oh, I missed it. On first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading.
Okay, any discussion? Okay, so the motion before the committee is that the committee approves R277-324 paraprofessional, paraeducator programs, assignments, and qualifications, draft 1 on first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading. All those in favor? Aye. I think that passed unanimously, right? Yes. Okay. And
Okay,
go
so-
ahead with the other information.
So now let me tell you what we would like to do with this rule. Now that it will go to the full board for approval without the references. So I'm sure you saw that there is an incorporated document, a document that's incorporated by reference into this rule. That document is the standards for the Utah standards for instructional paraeducators. So individuals who are serving with teachers to provide instruction to students. There are paraeducators in schools who don't, like resource aides, lunch aides, but that the board has for many years had standards for paraeducators. And because they don't fit into the structure you have for core standards or for standards for educators or for administrators, the board has simply chosen to incorporate this document by reference. It is not required by statute. It is not required by your rule. That is a decision that the board has made for several years. If you remember, last year you updated the competencies for a special educator for preparation for a special educator. As a result of the update of those competencies, you added not necessarily any standards, but you added competencies in very specific language about how a special educator needs to train and supervise a paraeducator in order to provide instruction, which you may or may not remember, but because that is required by federal law. Okay, it's actually part of the IDEA standard. So, as a result of those updates, we are proposing to update your incorporated document to add specific competencies related to instructional paraeducators who serve in special education programs. The standards are for paraeducators are basic to any instructional paraeducator. So the standards are support instructional opportunities, demonstrate professionalism and ethical practices, support a positive learning environment, and communicate effectively and participate in the team process. So then there are competencies under those standards, just like all of your other standards, and we would propose to add a few competencies very specific to those instructional paraeducators serving in special education programs. So because this is an incorporated document, we are proposing that the process that we use is to send you, the process we use to update that document and thus those standards is based on the core revision process. It's not the same, but that it's based on. And also based on the process that the board has used in the last year to update other documents incorporated by reference, including the LRBI, the Least Restrictive Behavior Intervention Manual, and the Adult Education Program Implementation Manual. So we would propose that we send you, the board, the proposed updates, and they aren't huge. I mean, you have 4 standards for paraeducators with about 6 competencies for each one. So this is not a big, huge process. It's on one page. It's all on one page, okay? Which is linked in the rule. And that that you have the opportunity, just as the board, to provide us feedback for 30 days, like you do for your core revision process. And then that we take that feedback, update, and bring them back to have the full board, just like in your core revision process, say, yes, please release these to the public for their feedback. That we then bring them back to Standards and Assessment Committee, just like in your other process, for you to look at the feedback that came from the public, make any adjustments that you recommend, and then for them to go to the full board to once again be incorporated by reference into your rule. If you would prefer that they weren't standards or that they weren't incorporated by reference, obviously you have the opportunity to make any of those changes. This is the process that has been used. I think this will probably be the 3rd time in the time that I have been a special education administrator for the board. We have updated the standards, and each time the board at that time has chosen to just incorporate them by reference into a rule. We're happy to do something differently, but this is the proposal.
Okay, we're not really voting, so
You're
it'd be
not
more of a
voting.
discussion. Yeah,
Yes.
it's not on the agenda or anything, but kind of a discussion around that. Let me just be clear. Let me just put it down back into a little nutshell. So you're asking if you have this process you need to go through. if we are to update the.
The rule, you would be updating the rule
Yeah,
because of the incorporated document.
yep. And so the simplified process would be putting the recommendations, getting some people together, giving us recommendations, we'd give you feedback. Those would come back to us, then they'd go before the full board and we'd incorporate that in.
Correct.
Or if there's some
Or-
other way to do it, or not
Tell
at all.
us, yes.
Tell me, I just have one question. When, in this case, if we incorporated these standards, which it sounds like there's some in
They
there already.
currently are.
How does the training take place? Does a paraeducator, and I'm only saying that they're not going to college to be a paraeducator. They are.
No, keep going.
Oh, okay.
Yes, I'm
So they're
following
getting
you. I'm
They're
following.
getting that training from their, like if they got hired as a para, they would then get the training associated with, and so who's responsible for that in order to meet the standards? That's kind of where I'm going with this.
Wonderful question. Thank you for asking it. So we currently have modules that we provide here at the state that LEAs can use to train paraeducators on the standards. And we have an associated handbook that goes much deeper. Your standards are one page, like I said, okay? That goes much deeper into the standards of how to implement them. What does it look like in a classroom? How can a teacher ensure that the teacher is providing adequate training and supervision, and that the paraeducator understands their roles and responsibilities? So an LEA can use our modules, or an LEA can provide their own training. The LEAs use the handbook that we have that are based on your standards as well for that training. We then also have the opportunity for the last couple years for paraeducators and special education programs to receive up to 36 hours of very specific training. There's 36 modules. It takes about an hour each module, which we pay them a stipend, about $20 per module, that they can do on off time when they're not working, that really go deep into the law, into instructional practices, into behavior support, those kind of things. And we do that through our office. So that LEAs don't have a problem with, well, the paraeducator is only supposed to work 18 hours a week. If they do this training, it puts them over the top of the 18 hours. So we do it through our office. Okay. And that is paid for with special education dollars. So the modules are available to everyone, but we can only pay the stipends to special education paraeducators.
Okay.
Does that respond to the question? 36, yes. There's way more modules than that. We pay for 36 of them.
Okay. Which just helps increase education and
Yes,
capacity and everything and a success for students. Are
And
there
recruitment and retention
Oh,
of
yeah.
paraeducators.
If they're understand what they're supposed to be doing, they're successful. Okay. Additional questions, comments? Are we good with anybody have any direction they want? Go
I
ahead.
just have questions, just general, to understand better how incorporated documents work. So you'd mentioned that we don't have to incorporate the documents. Can you tell me the pros and cons of
Yes.
of that?
I'm happy to, thank you.
Approach.
So when a document is incorporated by reference, it becomes rule. So if the rest of the rule is monitored, the process that is incorporated by reference is monitored. If there is if there's funding related to the rule, anything in the incorporated document then becomes applicable to the funding decisions. It becomes rule. It's generally incorporated by reference because it's too much information. Like to use the special education rules as an example, or the least restrictive behavior intervention manual, you would have a rule that is 300 pages long. So the document is incorporated by reference so that your rule is not as big, but
And not written in rural
and
language.
not written in rural
Right,
language.
that's
It's
the
much
other.
more accessible language, hopefully. I mean, that's part
Yeah.
of the purpose, is that the language is much more accessible. And so that piece, that to use the LRBI as an example, or the special ed rules as an example, this one-page document is example. So people can have that, right, sitting by their desk, use it. So, so those are some of the pros. A con would be if an individual is reading the rule and sees that link to the incorporated documents and doesn't recognize that it has the force of rule. It is law. It's your law, right? And don't then look into it. Don't read it. Don't take and just think, oh, well, I get it all because I've read the rule. That would be a con, I would assume. Does that help?
Yeah. Let's see. Okay, can you make changes, and I think I know the answer to this, but can you make changes to the incorporated document without
Changing the rule? No.
without us knowing or going through the process
Nope.
that we're recommending?
The
even
rule has to
here?
change. In order for the incorporated document to change, you have to approve the rule. So that process, the way we organize that process is in your agenda. You will review the incorporated document. It'll be its own agenda item. And then the agenda item right under it will be then to approve an update to the rule that incorporates that document. So it's a two-step process. You can't do the one without the other.
Which speaks to the importance of what Board Member Carey said yesterday. We needed a date of when that rule, right, or when the incorporated document in the rule, there has to be a date associated with it so we know we're using the most updated one.
Yeah.
Yes, so that it's not, if something gets changed, it's not, we know that it was in whatever. Does that make sense? Like the date is relevant.
How do you separate a document that expands on your role versus the guiding elements of a rule? Where your rule could be 300 pages long, but how do I say this? Is there a way to separate those? Is it okay to separate an incorporated document so it doesn't have to become law?
Oh, and then it would be guidance.
Yeah,
If
then
you
it would
didn't
just
put
be-
it in a rule, it's guidance.
It doesn't have to be there.
Yeah.
If you don't put it in the rule, then it doesn't have to be there. Like yesterday when we did the construction one, right? So then it's more, if we didn't put it in the rule, it would be, well,
A good idea.
it's
Best
a great idea.
practice.
Yeah. So,
So we were.
I mean, there's pluses and minuses to that, right?
Yeah.
Right,
So-
exactly. Do we see in the past, do we see that it's more beneficial to have an incorporated document versus just guidance? Does that help with compliance? Does it help?
It definitely helps with
Clear.
compliance.
Okay. All right, cool. Thank you. I think that's all.
Sure, that's good.
Thank you.
Okay, I think go ahead and proceed with what
Okay.
you're doing. I'm not hearing anybody saying, would you like to see something different? Okay. Any other information there?
No, thank you.
Okay, and that was relevant to 3.4, just so public knows. So 3.5, where's our math people? Are we ready? Mathematics standards, public review updates? Oh, you're behind us. We're behind you. You're behind us, so, okay. Who's kicking us off?
Yes.
Yes, green's on now.
Green is on. Okay.
Green's on downstairs.
Upstairs is red.
I know.
Downstairs is green.
Sorry, it's confusing.
Apologies. Good morning. I'm Molly Basham. I am the Early Learning Mathematics Specialist here to provide you an update on the public review of the draft P12 math standards that were released to the public back in June. And I see we already have our document from backup pulled up. So we have at this point completed 3 public meetings. One was held on July 21st in Canyon School District One was held on July 23rd. That one was virtual. It was held on Zoom. And then the third public meeting that we have already completed was held in Washington County School District on August 1st. If you look at that box that reads attendance, that July 21st meeting in Canyons had 10 people attend. That meeting did not have any attendees who wanted to make comment on the record. They were all there to listen, so we got to answer some questions for folks, but no official comments were recorded at that meeting. Our July 23rd Zoom meeting had 31 people in attendance. We did have quite a good number of people at that meeting who made comments that were recorded to be shared with the writing committee. And when I submitted backup last week, we had not yet had the August 1st meeting down in Washington County, but we did have 15 people sign in to attend that meeting and got some great public comment there as well. Updated numbers, what's in backup says 218, but when we were looking at the Qualtrics results from the asynchronous survey that was sent out to the public with the press release and via numerous newsletter outlets from the agency, we have received about 225 responses on that Qualtrics, so we're getting some great feedback in writing from the public. We have respondents who have identified living in 18 different counties. That question is optional, so not every response that we've gotten has had that member of the public identify where they're from, but they have identified 18 different counties represented, representing both our urban, suburban, and rural communities around the states. We also have a question on the Qualtrics asking folks to self-identify what stakeholder groups they belong to. So we have received about 70, 69 that time. It's up to 72 last time we checked. Folks who have identified themselves as either parents or guardians, 126 teachers, 4 administrators, 7 people who identified themselves as other school staff, 5 folks from the higher education community, and 9 individuals who felt that they belonged in some other category, and we gave them a short response box option. So we've had responses from a special education aide, a retired professor, a local board member, a policymaker, a math department chair at one of our universities, a mathematics technologist, and a teacher specialist who focuses on assessment. So we're really getting a great variety of respondents from folks around the state. General themes that have come out from the responses that have been generated so far, both through the survey and through the public meetings, there is a lot of support for the work of the writing committee. Broadly, folks are expressing gratitude that the standards are being updated and appreciative of the work and time that went into the process. There has been a lot of support for the inclusion of the mathematical skills within the standards, the embedding of them into the standards themselves. There's been a lot of support for the increased emphasis on data science down into the elementary grades, support for the elementary standards and the way that they encourage fluency and automaticity with numbers and math facts. There's been support for the inclusion of the secondary 3 pathways opportunities and the choice that that provides for students and their families to pick the path that best meets the needs of their child. And then we have received more so in the last couple weeks, I think, as teachers are gearing up for back to school, but feedback on specific standards that are really actionable so that we can take that back to the writing committee and really give them that, standard 2.0A.1, here are suggestions that teachers have made, which is going to be really valuable feedback for the committee doing that work moving forward. Our next steps, we have one additional public meeting that we will be holding next week on the 13th. Up in Ogden City School District. We'll continue accepting those asynchronous responses until September 17th. That'll be the close of the 90-day public comment window. September 17th. Yep, it's a Wednesday. And then once that public comment window is closed in either September or October, depending on how quickly we can get finance and small service agreements back together with our writing committee in this new fiscal year, we will reconvene the writing committee so that they can start going through those public comment reviews. Any questions?
Okay. Anybody have comments or questions they want to ask?
I do.
Go ahead.
And I think it just comes back to when everything closes on the September 17th date, and you say you call back the writing committee, if you see substantial changes that we might need to sit down and talk about making, how does that work?
So the writing committee, I'll answer broadly, and then I'm like, I see
I don't
Nate
want to freak
ready.
you out.
Yeah.
I'm just going worst case
No,
scenario,
you're
and then
totally
we'll want to
fine.
build back from there. So.
So we are currently trying to work out the well, I shouldn't say maximum. We are trying to schedule and plan to have enough time with the writing committee as possible to make sure that these standards are the best possible standards, no matter what that level of work is. So at this point in the process, the writing committee will reconvene. They will go through and put eyes on every single comment, and they will respond to it. They will discuss it. They will make the adjustments as needed. If substantive changes are needed, that is embedded in the process at this point, if changes needed to happen. Nate, you seemed like you wanted to add to that.
Yeah, Nathan Ox, STEM coordinator for Utah State Board of Education. The process has the writing committee taking all the feedback into consideration and then submitting another draft to the board. So if we run into anything that is like consequential at a scale we didn't expect, or that kind of shifts the whole direction of the project, we would come to the board to seek guidance in those cases. But as per the kind of board approved process, the next step will be similar to the step that happened before we released for public comment, which is the writing committee takes all the comments into consideration, submits a draft to the board. The board has 30 days for feedback based on the writing committee's feedback before the final approval process, which there's another time when the writing committee will get together, post board's feedback, and then the final product goes to committee and full board.
When you are having these public comments, are you the note taker? Are you taking notes of the things that not just the positive, but also the areas that they're maybe struggling with? Or
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So those are
Every
being
comment that
recorded as
folks
well.
have asked to have included, as
Yeah.
we have laid out the expectations at the start of the meeting that folks need to indicate, because there have been folks who are like, we just want to ask you a question. This isn't necessarily feedback for the writing committee. We just want to understand something. Those kinds of queries are not necessarily being recorded, but anything that folks are indicating, this is a public comment. We want this on record. We want the writing committee to hear what we have to say. All of that is being recorded. Okay. Notes are being taken when it's an in-person meeting.
Yeah, and Nathan Ox, STEM coordinator. Additionally, you'll have there'll be transparency into every comment that was offered throughout the entire process. In addition to the board, the writing committee looking at each of those comments, you'll also have the opportunity to see what they look like, both submitted through the Qualtrics as well as in the public forum, like the synchronous public forum.
Yeah, that document will be added to board backup when. It'll go forward to you when you have your 30-day review, and it'll be submitted in backup moving forward when the draft goes back to this committee in several months.
Okay, did you write the themes before the Washington County meeting? Like you had already filled out this paperwork, or does that?
Yes.
Is that right? Okay.
This would have had to have been submitted for backup before the Washington County meeting.
Gotcha. I know there was some lots of robust feedback at that Washington County meeting, and teachers wanting to see. The word that stuck out to me was, I just kind of asked the question, like, what have you seen through Common Core? Because we had a number of seasoned teachers from different schools who've been teaching math for a while, right? And disjointed is the word that has come back and I heard them talk about feeling like before, when we had separated math versus integrated, that they were able to go deeper in those subjects with geometry, algebra, calculus, trig. Anyway, but all those were recorded and you'll be discussing. And I know you've put so much work into this. Thank you. I know it's hard sometimes to incorporate everybody's things, but so thanks for your work. And yeah.
Any additional questions or comments?
I think I just also want to just put it forward that we've tried, like as a committee, I know some of us specifically have tried to encourage like a specific direction that we would like these math standards to be. And I hope you just kind of keep that at the forefront. I've heard it the reading wars, I've heard it the math wars. I do know that parents and teachers alike are very interested in addressing what we feel has been a deficit in the math realm. Just like there's been a deficit that finally people were ready to talk about with reading. And so I hope that we really take that to heart, that this is a pivotal moment where we can use the things that work, that not just the trendy stuff that we're hoping will finally work, but we go back to like the classical time, tested math concepts. So anyway, please just maybe go back and listen to the things that we've said. Could we have it line up to these types of math practices, and make sure that we're not just doing the trendy stuff that's just not giving us the scores that we're looking for. I mean, this is a huge discussion statewide on every single level. So, and I also hope that professors are a part of that, and I'll do everything I can also in the next month to try and get their feedback. So if we're seeing that it needs more work, I'm never afraid to go back and get the product right. Like, again, on the business side, you do it or your business dies. So us, it's different because sometimes with legislation or government, the worse you do, the more money you get. Because you get to just mindlessly keep taxing people to try and get it right. It's just doesn't work in my brain. So I'm not afraid if we needed to take more time to just make sure that we are really getting the math approach right, that the public is asking for and teachers are asking for. So anyway, just wanted to get that and let you know kind of where my standard will be moving forward into the next processes. So thank you.
Yeah, one of the things that, Nathan Ox, STEM coordinator, one of the things that we've created in kind of process of the feedback coming out are graphs that help kind of communicate the number of like favorable comments versus the number of unfavorable comments overall. And then also additional, like, here's all the comments that are specifically saying, like, there's opportunities to improve in this standard. So again, like, you'll have full transparency into what all of those comments look like, and we'll try to create some data visualizations that are like helpful, that won't require you to
For those who
sort
don't like
through
sorting through
1,000 comments.
hundreds of pieces of both quantitative and qualitative data, I think it's super fun, but
This side of the table loves it.
others might prefer the visuals.
No, we love that. We love the.
Also, I have a question related to math, maybe not math standards. But we did have something come out that just said we were number 2 in math scores across the country. Do you have any information on that?
So we have also seen those articles. We've done a little bit of digging because none of the articles that we have seen have cited exactly which source that is coming from, but it talked about 4th and 8th grade test scores, which makes us assume that it's probably the NAEP scores, which we already knew Utah has historically, over the last few years, scored really well on NAEP assessments. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that article, and again, there's several of them, and they seem to also suggest that there's like some other model that is at play. There's some characteristics that are being like incorporated both at the full school level, because Utah was 11?
Yeah, it's like 8th and 11 is what I've also seen.
And second in mathematics. And so we have sent some emails to try and figure out like the specifics, but it sounds like
Will you
there's other
update us
characteristics.
if you figure out where that?
I actually think I know what it is.
Wallet Hub's the same source our legislature uses when every time we get a good ranking on the economy, so.
I think what they took into account is they said, well, who's on your board? And then they were like, So that, yep, extra points. So, I mean, I don't know, but I think that might be the correlation, so.
And I brought what I'm going to say next up in other meetings that we've had with the math standards. Awesome, we're second, but if we're second on a decline, it's still not bragging rights, It's just not. So let's break from this and go like this, and then, hey, what are they doing? And do this, not stay on top of a decline. So anyway.
Totally.
Sounds good. I have lots of comments, but I'm not making them today, so. I'm waiting. Any other, okay, I think we're actually done. I'm seeking a motion. Yeah, the motion
To adjourn?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Thanks for joining us online. So.